We are a people who stand beneath one symbol, the cross. To the world it says suffering and shame, but to us it declares unspeakable love.
You have made a place where love and wrath run wild, where penalty and grace are finally reconciled.
You have made a way, the broken and made whole again.
At the cross, your glory bore my shame,
We're talking about the seasons of life again. This is a different direction. I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. It's that one verse, Romans 12:1 and then Romans 12:2. Present your body. The body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, the instrument through which the Holy Spirit works. And when that happens, we're given strength, we're given the capacity to do kingdom work. Sometimes our obedience will be sacrificial, of course. Present your body in every season. And then in Romans 12:2 it says, do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world. So how do I conform? Well, it could be a lifestyle, it could be thoughts, it could be our values, it could be dress styles, it could be our actions or inaction. There's another way that we conform, and one of society's, I think, really deadly traps. The church is very vulnerable to this kind of conformity. We exploit our souls in order to stay abreast of trends, styles, to accumulate, to march in lockstep with society. Matthew Wilder wrote a song. You probably don't, most of you even know who Matthew Wilder is, but you'll remember this. And nothing's going to break my stride, and nothing's going to slow me down. Remember that about the 70s? That's pursuing the brass rank, satisfaction, contentment. So you have people like, you can pick out any name, but Kurt Cobain and Andy Gibb were looking for contentment. Contentment ultimately in drugs. One of them committed suicide. There's this long list of movie stars and others, everyone, people, that you think, you would think that they would have the least reason to succumb to the pressures of any of the seasons of life and become victims. I recently read, if you are too busy to use a hot air hand dryer in a public restroom, your lifestyle is too hectic for your health. Well, sometimes it's like, I want to do it quickly, and grab a paper towel. So the world hurtles along in this fast lane, and I realize I'm preaching on this Sunday especially because we're kind of downsizing, but even then I'm preaching to a lot of people that are retired, and some of you are saying, I've already done that, and I've gotten out of the fast lane. But I've also talked to a lot of retirees who say, hey, I can't seem to get out of the fast lane, I just get busier. So if it works for you, good, and if what I say helps, good, and if it doesn't, sorry, you've just been sleeping in anyway or watching a ball game. Speaking of ball games, Miami didn't do so well last night, did they? Rich, I don't know if, I think Paul might be asleep back there, so I'll bother him. Anyway, striving, pursuing, and wanting more, but it's not the world only that's in the fast lane. We are also guilty of conforming. Our desires may be very different, our goals may be different, our energy levels, our temperament, but we too get caught up in this fast lane. However, this is where the message takes the other fork in the road as we went last Sunday. It seems that God has built into every person a natural cycle, and it's one that we sometimes ignore, and sometimes we don't even recognize what's happening. We all need to be refreshed and renewed and recharged. And a lot of times when you go away or I go away and you come back or I come back and someone says, how was your vacation? You want to say it wasn't a vacation. I couldn't wait to get home. I'm so tired. But we really do need a real vacation sometimes. I'm not sure we always get it. And if I don't build that into my schedule, to some degree, it will occur anyway. That becomes the problem. It's like you remember the teeter-totter? It was something that gobbled up children, and they probably make them out of some kind of plastic silliness now. I knew you didn't have to tell me as a kid, I knew they gobbled up children, and I still love the teeter-totter and the merry-go-round. But at any rate, that's not really in my sermon. There's this delicate balance of the teeter-totter. It's giving and receiving, and giving and receiving. And sometimes we push our bodies and our minds past the natural limits. Secondly, we can also push our souls beyond the natural limit. My soul, that's the humanity that makes me feel emotion. Whereas the spirit, that's our deeper connection in God when we receive Jesus. And sometimes they sort of seem to overlap. If you wanted to take your fist and squeeze it real tightly and hold it and hold it and hold it. Don't do that if you have arthritis in that hand. And then you slowly open it, and then you begin to work the fingers and relax, and it begins to feel better. Sometimes we try to hold that sustained grip in life. And sometimes people are guilty of doing that out of necessity, though. I realize that. We've all been there, too. You say, well, Pastor, I feel that way all the time. Some people do, tense, uptight, worried. My mother would be a good example. I've been picking on Mom for a while, haven't I? She's in heaven. She doesn't care what I say. Love Mom, but Mom was always like that. All of us cycle through the seasons, and we're either allowing for the balance that God has intended, or we are in need of adjusting our lives to coincide with God's natural design. I need to open my hand and relax to receive. Now, St. Paul says, don't be conformed to the pattern of this world, be transformed, be renewed. Now, there are two words in our vocabulary that sometimes are appropriate, but sometimes they're very destructive and very, we'll just leave it at destructive. The first one is comparison, and the next one is competition. Believe me, I don't think everyone ought to get an award, don't get me wrong. Nowadays, everybody that is in the run gets a reward. That's not really the way it was designed for. However, competition can be a struggle sometimes, especially for people that, like me, that got to pick for the basketball team of the 4th or 5th or 6th or 7th or 8th guy. So there's stories of Christian leaders that burned out for God. Have you ever read that? Oh, John Wesley, I don't think he was one of them. This spiritual leader burned out for God, or he burned the candle at both ends for God. And so, what did he do? He died of exhaustion. So I think that's a neat thing. It's kind of nice that this guy was so dedicated. But people that do that probably shorten their lives and are not able to give and give and give. They need to learn to pay attention to the seasons of life. So I'm not completely impressed with that. Their dedication is admirable, and their application is questioned. If you will be aware of your motivation levels, or if you have an excellent memory, you'll discover that your soul, even when you push very hard, is going to cycle through each one of the seasons, even though we try to hold it off. It may seem that last Sunday's message and this message create a paradox, but both of them are true. A spring, a summer, an autumn, and a winter. It seems that God has built into our soul this kind of clutch, a way to disengage. At work and at church, we need to cooperate. So there will be times when you will simply go through the motions, and you know what? It's okay. Is it okay with me? Well, actually, I feel guilty sometimes when I go through the motions and I'm not doing something that I should be doing. But I know I've got to push that away because it shouldn't be there. You just go through it. So you will retreat and you will lack zeal. I think sometimes people just need to hear this because they don't realize what's happening. Maybe they feel guilty because of something that they shouldn't. You lack zeal. You may be faithful to keep your commitments, but it'll be stressful. It'll be routine. It's not a mountaintop experience anymore. So let's use the image of the seasons of the year and look at what happens to our souls. The four Gospels only refer to 52 days of the life of Jesus. That's something. Only 52 days. But we see that he was aware of the need for involvement, and he was also aware of the need for retreat. So in one account, he's preaching and he's teaching and he's walking the dusty roads and he's performing miracles, and because he's in a human body, he's tired. But then there are other times when he goes away by himself or with his disciples, and they have a time of renewal and prayer, and maybe they even do a little R&R, some cornhole or something like that. I don't know. 2 Timothy 4:2 says, be prepared in season and out of season. But it's not possible to give 100% in every season. Now, there was a guy named an ambassador to Great Britain, Joseph Kennedy, who was not a great role model, by the way, but he said something interesting. Life is not a 100-yard dash, but more in the nature of a cross-country run. If we sprint the whole time, we not only fail to win the race, but we never last long enough to reach the finish line. So as we examine the seasons of the soul, what season are you experiencing right now? How long do the seasons last? A week? A month? A year? Your soul needs all the seasons. So let's begin season springtime first of all. Springtime represents this, and you know, is there an outline in your bulletin?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know if that was put in or not. Okay. Springtime represents the season of initiative. You're being refreshed. How long does that last? You're doing 6 jobs at the church, and you get a great idea for a new program. And I've talked to you a little bit about that before. I know you're experiencing springtime when you approach me and you say, Pastor, I've been thinking about this. I think even people who tend to be uninvolved will experience a springtime mode, and suddenly they may want to get involved just a little bit. The springtime of the soul is reaching out in a new way. It's having enthusiasm for new ideas. It's being surprised when other people don't get excited about the idea, especially if it's their idea. It's imagination, it's innovation, and it's inspiration. In 1 Samuel 17, it gives us the stories of the Israelites and David versus Goliath, and King Saul's soul is in an autumn season. Absolutely. But David is in the springtime, summer season, and Saul is cautious and fearful, which he's in that season a lot. And David has this invincible spirit, and he takes care of business. Now, I hope that some of you are experiencing that season right now. I don't know. Season of initiative and springtime. The season of summer would be next, the season of involvement, the time of the soul's greatest productivity, a time of steady involvement, a time I'm happy to make sacrifices, a time of accomplishment, a time when I'm not griping and whining and complaining. Not that any of you would ever do that. Not looking for reasons to get involved, not looking for reasons to disconnect. During the period of springtime, I build up this sizable agenda and this summer phase, and I enjoy following through on those accomplishments. St. Paul's a great example of one who operated much of the time in the summer season, but sometimes it's difficult even to tell ourselves what season we're in. And certainly when we look at Paul's life, you know, he sang in prison while he was suffering from a lacerated back, and he also was a Roman citizen, but he shouldn't have been there at all. He's rejected by people, but he stayed on mission. And he stood before Governor Felix, and he shares the good news. And then he stood before Governor Festus, and he shared the good news. And he stood before King Agrippa, and he said, "Almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian." Now, some people think that was just in jest, but I'd like to think it wasn't, or at least that there was a serious thought there. I think Paul's winter was earlier, near the time of his conversion. So the summer season of the soul should be the time of greatest accomplishment and of feeling self-worth. Now, I know people who are up and down all the time. I know other people who seem to just stay on top all the time. They don't, but that's the way they appear. They put on that kind of show. That's all right sometimes, but you don't have to do that. The season of autumn, or the season of retreat. If you enjoy productivity and achievement, this phase of the soul cycle is very frustrating. You may continue to do all your tasks, not very excited about it. You're physically weary. The soul retreats, the spirit's gone, and you wonder why in the world did you volunteer for that job 4 weeks ago or a month ago or whatever. Here I'm stuck with that. How can I get out? I don't know. You fight inner feelings because you're not as excited about the ministry and the work. And sometimes you feel worthless. And sometimes you feel powerless and uninspired, even unappreciated when we get down to really, being truly discouraged. Nobody cares anyway. Nobody said thank you. So the question then is, where is God? Where is God? So you're tempted to resign. I'll see if I can back out of this carefully. So it's not a time to push your soul. Your soul is weary, so we try to manipulate excitement And but all the while you may be experiencing depression or anger. When the Bible comes to mind as we think about the seasons of autumn, Elijah, always. I had a lady one time that came up to me after church, a very good friend actually, and she said, "I'm not sure I agree with your message." And I said, came back to me a couple of years later and said, "Remember that message you preached?" I think you were right. So, he's running for his life. It's in 1 Kings 19. And who's after him? Well, Jezebel and her troops. He's afraid. Well, it bothered me that he was afraid, but he was human. He was afraid. He was stressed. He was physically and emotionally drained. He's the one guy in the Bible we know suffered depression. Probably a lot of other people. So he says, "Lord, I've had it. I've had it, Lord." He's become suicidal. He's whining. He has a pity party. Well, what was really wrong with Elijah? He was tired. And he was exhausted. And sometimes we get to that point. We need physical rest. We need soul rest. And we need real vacation. Real vacation. Remember, he went to sleep, and the angel woke him up, and he said, "Get up. It's time to eat." He ate. He was nourished. He went right back to sleep. And a little while later, the angel came back, and he said, "Get up. You still need more nourishment." And he did it again. His strength finally returned, and he got up, and he traveled 40 days and 40 nights without stopping. He went to Horeb. He's still depressed, and the Bible says he went into a cave, and he spent the night. He still has no will to go on. He even says to God, "All your prophets are dead, and I'm the only person that's left. They're trying to kill me. You know, that Jezebel's trying to kill me." Remember Jezebel? Remember how she died? Oh, it's X-rated. They threw out a window and she was eaten by dogs. If you don't believe that, that'll give you something to look up in the Bible if you haven't read that portion. They're all trying to kill me. I'm the only one left. When I'm seriously tired, I get depressed. I do. I get discouraged. I don't mean that I go put my head in a hole. I just know that suddenly I feel weighed down. I just don't feel good. I'm spiritually weakened. It's in a condition. It happens to everybody, by the way. In fact, your greatest discouragement, your greatest depression, your greatest defeat will often come immediately after your greatest victory. It will, I promise. In fact, sometimes if I feel like we had a great Sunday, Monday's kind of, why do I feel this way? Can't explain all that. Some of it's spiritual warfare, some of it's just the way we are, physiologically. I think that's whether you're a Christian or not, you deal with that. Elijah was momentarily experiencing an autumn season, and then he slips from autumn to winter, and yet he's remembered as one of the great Old Testament patriarchs. Momentarily experiencing this autumn season. And then later, God will casually mention to Elijah, by the way, Elijah, listen just for a second. You're not the only one left. There are one more, two, no, actually there's 7,000 more people that are faithful to me in the land. You see, sometimes our fears are greatly exaggerated. Matter of fact, fear, that's a part of fear. It's greatly exaggerated. Autumn will come from time to time. People may fault you. They may criticize you. If you're uninvolved and less excited about their project, but sometimes just going through the motions is really all right. And you don't need to feel guilty about it. When you do, you say, "Get thee behind me, Satan." It's therapy. Exactly what you need. When I went to my last church, before I came here, and then I worked a couple of years at a camp, but I had just come through 2 surgeries, and I was preparing to move. All of those were big deals, although I didn't think the surgeries were that big, but they would have been considered major surgeries. And all of a sudden, I was introduced to clinical depression. I didn't know what that was. You know, I got depressed when I couldn't find ice cream in the refrigerator, but This was real depression. This was something I could explain. I could just go look out the window for half an hour and just kind of gaze and not want to do anything and want to sleep in a kind of curled up position. Except some people don't like to talk about that. Somehow they're embarrassed about depression. Everybody suffers some kind of depression. But this was serious. And what am I going to do? Can't think. So I just explained my dilemma to this new church. It seemed like it was just a response from the surgeries, but then it's also a big deal when you're moving. You're moving to a new church and you're moving and all that, and just so I explained the dilemma, and I said, for a while, I'm not going to be able to perform much of the duties of the church. I probably will only be able to preach and teach for a while. And they agreed. They were okay with that. So for a little while in this winter season, I spoke maybe 2 or 3 times a week, and eventually I moved into finally the spring and the summer season. And the church began to grow and became one of the largest churches in the district. But they were faithful to give the new pastor a break. And Father was faithful to help me move on. And I still have some of those moments where I think, oh no, I don't want to slip back into that depression. But you see, retreat is not surrender. It's not defeat. Retreat may not have anything to do with failing God or failing yourself. The soul needs its Sabbath. Now, let me say this. I'm not condoning laziness. As a matter of fact, I have a few people in my family that are like me. And whatever they are employed doing, they do it well. They always do it well. My son's that way. My grandson and my granddaughter and some others in the family. And it always pays off. You earn your $40 an hour, your $10 an hour, whatever. Just do it and earn it. But if you do it well, it comes back to pay off again and again. I've already given you some examples in my own life about that. So, you know, I'm not suggesting that laziness is something that you want to do. I don't condone a do-nothing Christian or the uninspired lives of pessimistic people. I'm not suggesting that it's all right to neglect the work of the kingdom. We simply need to understand why these feelings come, and if we need to rest, then rest. Now, I know that some people don't have that privilege. You're in a job where you can't get away. You just have the Lord to help you and pray to help you to have an opportunity to do that. Anyway, finally, the winter season of the souls. A minister was experiencing this winter season, and he said, and I quote, "Haven't read my Bible except for sermons for nearly a month. And even the sermons are tough to come by, and I haven't been praying much either, maybe 10 minutes a day." Well, was he less holy than he was last month? Was he, as they do sometimes, was he backsliding? I don't think so. Have you all been there where you just kind of, this is what I should do, but, you know, I just can't. I'm not saying it's not a good idea to try to do it. And there was a note in my father's Bible that he had written, or maybe this was a little article, and it had to do with when you pray, and it seems like your prayers don't leave the room, they just kind of come back to you. He said, just keep praying, because that's faith. And faith is a part of what we do. Other times, you know, when you pray, it's just like God just opens up the windows of heaven, which kind of bothers me, because sometimes I think I've got to get back in that prayer mode where I just feel God, sense God in my life, and He's just, and I go try it, and it's like, it didn't work. I'm not feeling any different today, but I'm doing the right thing. So the soul sometimes, I guess I could say, don't underestimate the value of doing. You know what? That's maybe I should give credit where credit's due. The great theologian Winnie the Pooh once said, "Don't underestimate the value of doing nothing." Okay? Sounds better when I give him the credit. The soul sometimes pulls away from serious involvement and rest. I don't allow for that in my life. It began to happen, you know, without my permission. And then what happens is depression, ulcers, or high blood pressure. You know, it doesn't have to be in the church. It can be in the corporate world where you just keep pushing and pushing because I'm going to give myself a break, you know. 8 months from now, well, you may not make it to that break. High blood pressure, nervous breakdown. Shirley Wilson's father was a Presbyterian minister. And you knew him. He was here. What the sweetest, kindest man. And I don't know that he ever called it a nervous breakdown, because I'm never quite sure. Maybe I should ask some of our nurses and doctors about what is really a nervous breakdown. But I think that's what he said. I had a nervous breakdown. In fact, it was while he was preaching that he just kind of... So he said he had to give up the ministry, but he stayed in the ministry as a staff pastor instead of the senior pastor. It happens to the best of people. Should I read the Bible each season? Of course, if I can. It's a holy habit. If I don't, okay. So during the winter season, I'm not giving 100%, but I am growing and being fed, because God has a way of doing that for us when we're in that season. Resting. I can read when I rest. I like to read. Receiving, renewing, anticipating spring, the springtime of my soul. There's a story about John the Apostle, writer of the fourth gospel. Obviously, this is not in the Bible, but one of those things that you pick up from some of the other historians, like Josephus. A friend of John's discovered him one day in a field near the Sea of Galilee, and he's armed with a bow and arrow, and he's hunting. Probably got one of those bows from Cabela's, you know, Fredbear Element compound bow or something like that. Maybe not. But his friend was surprised that he was hunting. Well, some people like to hunt. And a lot of people in my family that like to hunt. So his friend was surprised, taken aback. It's like, after all, ministers and disciples, they only pray, and they only meditate and study, and then they pray some more, right? And that's why some people think pastors are so boring, but, you know, we like to fish and so forth. So. In fact, Jim's not here this morning. You remember Jim Winstall, him and I concocted, when I first came to this church, there was in my contract, I don't really think it was there, but he said it was there, fishing on my boat, anytime, no charge. Well, I got to fish a lot because Jim and I fished together a lot. In fact, the best yellowtail fishing I ever did was on Jim's boat, but he's not been able to do much of that lately, so we haven't. But we had a good time together. Well, I don't know if you remember, but Jim and I concocted something. He let me. When I'm out fishing with Jim, at my request, he changes the name of his boat, to Visitation. His boat was named Visitation. And then if someone calls the secretary or calls my wife and said, can I talk to the pastor? No, he's out on visitation today. I don't know if anybody really did that, but we did do it. I did tell him we needed to change the name. Anyway, John's friend said, I thought you were supposed to be spreading the gospel and preaching the good news. And John's response was, you see this bow? He said, even this bow will lose its tautness if I don't occasionally relax the string. So as we serve God, and as we pursue our vocation, and as we live life, we need to understand why we feel and act and respond the way we do. And what I have told you today is a drop in the bucket, but and it's obviously way different than anything I usually share, but I think we need to understand that it helps immeasurably if we understand the seasons and the cycles of the soul in our lives. The springtime is a season of initiative. And the summer of my life is a time of involvement, even though these may change. Some of these little seasons may only be a week or two, or they may be a year. The autumn is retreat and withdrawal, the winter is renewal. And it's not something we can always control, but it is something we need to recognize. I want to close this morning, instead of with a blessing, let me close with this prayer. It's the constant call of the Bible for a balance between being and doing. Between being and doing. If we allow ourselves to be conformed to the world, we're going to discover that being gets eclipsed by doing. And for Christians, that's an imbalance that we need to avoid. So let me just pray this prayer. I think it's just really a beautiful prayer. My benediction prayer is a prayer that will kind of share the essence of the lesson. Oh God, slow me down. Slow me down. I pray for the quiet renewal of my mind, steady my hurried race and pace with an inner sense of the eternal reach of time. Give me, O Lord, in the middle of the clutter of the day, the calmness of the everlasting hills. Break the tensions of my nerves and muscles with the divine music that lives in my memory. In your time, may your word vibrate with a new pulse in my spirit. Teach me the art of taking inner vacations, of recognizing when I need to reach out and when I need to reach in, and to do that even when others would squeeze me into an awkward mold that doesn't fit. Remind me each day of the story of the hare and the tortoise, that I may learn that the race is not always to the swift, that there is more to life than increasing its speed. Inspire me to send my roots deep into the soil of life's enduring values, that I may grow up toward my potential. Oh, we ask your blessing, Lord, on your people. We thank you today for your faithfulness and your grace. In Christ's name. Amen. Please stand with me.